ॐ स्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्मस्वरूपिणे अवतारवरिष्ठाय रामकृष्णाय ते नमः। Today is the second part of the introduction on Indian philosophy. We have already seen that though all beings have to struggle for existence, other animals struggle blindly, but since man has the power of discrimination, he can see ahead, plan for the future, and discriminate. And that is why Swami Vivekananda says that man is a thinking being and must struggle on until he conquers death, until he sees the light. Then we saw that etymological sense of philosophy is love of knowledge. It tries to know things that immediately and remotely concern man, like what is the real nature of man, what is the aim of life, what is the nature of the world he lives in, etc. And he wants an ultimate solution, that which will explain everything. And Indian philosophy says that to arrive at this solution, we should have what is called in Indian literature the vision of truth, that is Tattva Darshana. Tattva means truth. Then we saw that philosophy has four main branches. Metaphysics, the branch which discusses the general problems regarding reality, man, nature and God. Epistemology, or the theory of knowledge, that is how we know. Logic, which discusses the laws of valid reasoning. And ethics, which investigates the problem of right and wrong. So the speciality of Indian philosophy is that it discusses them in a synthetic way, and that is called the synthetic outlook of Indian philosophy. And Indian philosophy is marked by a striking breadth of outlook. So we see that all these schools, when propounding their own views, also take care to learn the views of other schools. So everybody knows the views of others and they sympathize with them also. But to propound their own views, of course, they have to contradict some portions. And then we have seen that Indian philosophy is divided into two broad classes, namely Astika and Nastika, the orthodox and the heterodox. Astika means those who believe in the supreme authority of the Vedas, and Nastika are those who don't admit this authority. Then we saw that as to what experience should form the basis of philosophy, some schools hold that philosophy should be based on ordinary, normal experience. That is the Nyaya, the Vaisheshika, the Sankhya, the Bauddhas and the Jainas all believe in that approach. But on the other hand, there are some schools who hold that regarding matters such as God, liberation, etc., we cannot form any correct idea from ordinary experience. That is why we have to take the help of the testimony of reliable persons and scriptures. These reliable persons are the saints and sages, and the scriptures are the Vedas. So, this we have seen, and the main difference between Western and Indian philosophy which we saw is that in India, philosophy is not mere speculation. This is the main difference. It is a part of life. All the philosophers who propound these views about God, liberation, life, etc., they actually live their philosophy. Their lives are molded according to what they believe in. Then we saw as the method in which the philosophical systems were written down. We examined the sutra, the aphorism. Sutra means thread, and these were often so cryptic, so concise, that many commentaries had to be written to explain them. Otherwise, it is not possible to understand the meaning of the sutras independently. Then we saw the principle of Adhikaravada, that is, not all persons were fit for all things, and that in religious, philosophical, and social matters, we should take into consideration all these things and have different rules for everybody. This is the principle of Indian philosophers. So each teaching is not meant for all. We know that each person has different sanskaras, so they all should be taught in a different way. Till this we have discussed. Today we will discuss the common characters of all Indian philosophical systems. This is a very important topic. There are 4 common characters. So we will take them up one by one. The most striking and fundamental point of agreement between all the schools of philosophy is that philosophy is a practical necessity, and we have to cultivate it in order to understand how life can be best led. Means it governs how we should lead our life. This is the main thing. The aim of philosophical wisdom is not merely the satisfaction of intellectual curiosity, but a genuine search for truth. Therefore, we see that at the beginning of each philosophical work, it is customary for those philosophers to state how that philosophy will benefit us, in what way we will gain from it. If this is not said, if this is not described, then people will be in the dark as to the aim. And when a person sees or fears that he doesn't have anything concrete to gain, he won't be attracted to that philosophy. So, it is customary to state how each system of philosophy serves human ends. This is called Purushartha in Sanskrit. Purushartha, the aims of life. These are, as you know, there are 4 Purusharthas: Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. Dharma we all know, of course it is a big subject, later we have to discuss it in detail. Artha is wealth, Kama is satisfaction of desires, and Moksha is the ultimate aim. Ultimate aim, that is liberation. So, when we study these philosophies, we see that at the very beginning generally, they tell us how we will attain these Purusharthas with the help of that philosophy. Now, with the help means putting into practice the principles which those philosophies teach. Okay. For example, in Shankaracharya's introduction to the Gita, he says, of the Gita, the highest purpose, stated briefly, is liberation, characterized by complete cessation of transmigration together with its causes. So in one sentence he describes how Gita will help us, how we will attain liberation and there will be a complete cessation of the factors which lead to transmigration. So we will be forever free from the cycle of the births and deaths. Like this, in each philosophical system, they state the purpose. So, from this, it follows that philosophical systems don't teach us that all our lives we will just have to study those philosophies and gain bookish knowledge, and there it will stop. Not at all. Like in Western philosophy, what happens? These Berkeley, Hume, Kant, etc. You study them, you gain some knowledge, you can deliver lectures on them, you can pass some examinations, but nothing more is expected from you. When you study Kant, you are not expected to translate into your life what Kant believes in. No. But in India we do that. Okay. So the philosophies teach us that we have to translate these principles into action. Otherwise, say, I'll give you an example. It is what it is like. Suppose someone has been given a book on cooking. He or she memorizes that whole book, knows it by heart, but doesn't even enter the kitchen once. So, Indian thinkers say, then what use is that book? Or suppose a young person interested in ice hockey, he gets a coaching manual, he memorizes the whole manual, he can deliver lectures, but he has not even in his life put on the skates once, the skates of ice hockey. So what use will such a bookish knowledge be? It can't influence his life in any way. So in India we always put more stress on practice. After we learn these philosophical principles, we should not waste time in doing research or anything. We should immediately start applying those principles in our life. So Sri Ramakrishna explains this very beautifully. He says, what are these scriptures like? Suppose one has given you a list of things for shopping. You see the list, you read it carefully, memorize all the details. After that, there is no use of the list at all. Now you have to go and get those things. But if you don't even set foot out of your house, then of what use is the list? It is absolutely useless. So this is the principle behind Indian philosophy. Okay. Now what is the reason for this? The reason is why these philosophical systems were founded. The reason is that each system, the rishis who founded them, the saints, they were moved, their hearts were pained. Why? By a spiritual disquiet which sprang from the evils and sorrows existing in the world. These saddened them, that why people are suffering so much. Is there no way in which this suffering can be mitigated? See, the more spiritual a man is, the higher he climbs in the ladder of evolution, the more he is moved by the suffering of others. This we see in the lives of all the saints. It is said that when there was a volcanic eruption during Swamiji's time. So one day suddenly he was in Belur Math and he suddenly felt a great pain. And he said to one of his brother disciples that I am feeling so much pain. There has occurred some great disaster in some place of the world. So it is unbelievable how tender their hearts become by identifying themselves with the whole of humankind. So these rishis Similarly, they were saddened to see how people were suffering, and they wanted to understand the source of the evils which cause suffering. And this led them to examine the nature of the universe and the meaning of life. You see, man cannot be separated from God and from the universe, they found out. So, if you want to study man in detail, you have to study the universe and also know about God. So, this led them to this study in order to find out some means for completely overcoming the miseries to which humankind are subjected. This is the main goal. And in our scriptures and philosophies, what are these? These are the solutions propounded by these philosophers. They say, okay, you are suffering, we have found out the cause of this suffering, and we will describe to you how you can get rid of this suffering. So all our scriptures and philosophies have only this one aim. That's all. I will just quote Shankaracharya where he explains the purpose of the Vedas. What is the purpose, whole purpose of the Vedas? In one sentence he explains. What is it? He says, Sarvo Appayam Veda means all the Vedas, the whole of the Vedas. What is the purpose? Is devoted to Ishta Prapti Anishta Parihara. Ishta means what is good, what is beneficial. Anishta, what is evil. So, Ishta Prapti means how to get what is good. And Anishta Parihara. Parihara means giving up. Giving up what is evil. So, Sarvopayam Veda Ishta Anishta Prapti Pariharayo Upaya Prakashana Para means it throws light on this. Upaya means means. So, means of attaining what is good and avoiding what is evil. Why does the Vedas preach this? Why does the Vedas teach us this? Because Sarva Purushanam, all the people, all the inhabitants of the earth, Nisargata eva. Nisargata means by their very nature. It is our very nature. Tat prapti pariharayor ishtatvat. It is our very nature that we want that we should get only what is good. We should imbibe only what is good and avoid what is evil. If we can do that, then no misery can touch us. So, since all the people of this universe naturally seek these two ends, attaining what is good and avoiding what is evil, the whole of the Vedas is devoted to only these two ends. It is so beautifully as put and in such simple words. So this is the aim of not only the Vedas but each system of philosophy. For example, Sankhya philosophy, which we will study in detail. In the Sankhya, the most popular book to study Sankhya is Ishwara Krishna's Sankhya Karika. So, in the very beginning, if we read that, it is stated why Sankhya philosophy is being taught. What it is said? Dukkha traya abhigatat jigyasa tad apaghatake hetau. Dukkha traya, three types of miseries we have already seen. Adi bhautika, adi daivika, adhyatmika. No man is free from the miseries till he attains supreme knowledge. So, dukkha traya abhigatat, to rid ourselves from the torments caused by these three types of pain, proceeds what? Jigyasa, an inquiry into the means of terminating them. Tad apaghata, apaghata means finishing them. Okay. So, to rid us from these miseries forever, we now proceed an inquiry into the means of terminating them. Them means the miseries. And according to Sankhya, we note that the means is discrimination between Purusha and Prakriti. Purusha is the soul, Prakriti is nature. And Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, which is the most authoritative book on yoga philosophy, there it is also said that the aim of yoga is to attain Kaivalya. Kaivalya is the same. For all practical purposes, it is the same as what we call moksha in Vedanta. And if we go to Nyaya philosophy, the most authoritative work is Gautama's Nyaya Sutras. So there also the same thing is said, Tattva Jnanat Nishreyasa Adhigama. Tattva Jnanat, by the realization of the truth, Nishreyasa Adhigama, felicity is attained. So here also we say the supreme. Here felicity means supreme felicity, means getting which our problems will be solved forever. So that is gained by what? Tattva Jnanat. Tattva Jnana and Tattva Darshana is the same. Realization of the supreme truth. So all the philosophies, without any exception, have this one end in view, that how to teach humankind to get rid of their suffering forever. Give them a complete solution. Now, before taking up this second point, I will just digress a little because it is very important to understand some things before starting the study of the philosophies and the scriptures. Often we have seen that in philosophies, in the teachings of saints, sometimes we see that the dark side of life is often emphasized. Okay. Now, since our philosophies makes us aware of the dark side of life also, Indian philosophy has often been called pessimistic. That we always look at the negative side, that the world is evil and all that. We don't see what is there to enjoy in this world, the happiness which exists in this world. So this blame, we are blamed in that way, that we adopt a pessimistic attitude. How this is not true, we will see. In reply to this allegation, Indian philosophers say that we actually seem pessimistic because we face the truth boldly. We don't hide anything. And we have the courage to accept what the world is really like. We don't dilute it in any way to please anybody. We say, means the Indian philosophers say, that we have discovered that life, in the way it is being thoughtlessly led by the majority of people, is a mere sport of blind impulses and unquenchable desires. People are led by the impulses, they are blind impulses. Why? They never even seek to know what these impulses will lead to. and unquenchable desires for the world and things of the world. So we have discovered that life is being thoughtlessly led, and it inevitably ends in and prolongs misery. Not only will such a life will end in misery, in the end it has to, if we lead it thoughtlessly, and it will also prolong our misery. Because Indian philosophy says man is committing a terrible mistake and doesn't know it. He starts and ends his life in trying to seek for something where it cannot be found. Simple. We are trying to seek something where it has not existed in the past, present, or future. So if we try to seek that, what will the result will be? We won't get anything. Because that thing never existed there. So this is the truth which we have discovered, Indian philosophers say, and suppose we hide it, we don't tell this, will it lead to any good? It will lead to great harm, because people will continue to commit this mistake. Now, what is it that they are seeking where it cannot be found? What is it? We have said that people are seeking something which cannot be found. What is it they are seeking? Let us quote Swami Vivekananda. He did not mince any matters, we know. Whatever was the truth, he said it boldly. So I quote, Swamiji says, "The senses drag the human soul out. Man is seeking for pleasure and for happiness where it can never be found." This is the answer. Swamiji says. So he continues, "For countless ages we are all taught that this is futile and vain. There is no happiness here, but we cannot learn. We try and a blow comes. Do we learn then? Not even then. Like moths hurling themselves against the flame, we are hurling ourselves again and again into sense pleasures, hoping to find satisfaction there. We return again and again with freshened energy. Thus we go on till, crippled and cheated, we die." Unquote. This is what Swami Vivekananda says. We are searching for happiness where it does not exist. And what will be the result? In the end, our efforts will take all our energy out of us. It will go waste, and we will be crippled and cheated. We will feel that the world has cheated us. We have given everything to the world has not given us back anything at the end. Why this happens? Because we don't care to examine the nature of the world when we start our lives. Our lives we start on a false premise. So what will be the result? The result will be that we won't get anything. So these types of statements may make one say that Indian philosophy is pessimistic. But they forget that Indian philosophy also shows a way out, way to go beyond all kinds of misery forever. When we study Buddhism, we will see what is the basic 4 truths of Buddhism. First is, there is suffering. You can't deny it. Only a fool will deny it. If something exists, it must have a cause. Nothing can come without cause. So suffering has a cause. This is the second truth. But the third truth, there is a cessation to this suffering. We can end it completely. And the fourth truth is how to attain this. How to attain this cessation. This sums it very nicely. This sums it up very nicely. There is suffering, there is cause of suffering, there is cessation of suffering, and there is a way to attaining it also. This is what Indian philosophers say. Indian philosophers don't believe that an optimism which lulls us into false security is any good. It's no good at all. Now, suppose this virus is spreading everywhere. If you go on telling people, oh, there is no fear, you can come out and you can do anything you like, you can mix, you can have gatherings, what is that actually? It lulls them into a false security. So, those who don't take precautions will suffer. Similar is the case here. Ignoring what is bad is not optimism, Indian philosophers say. It is foolishness. You are ignoring what is right in front of you. So, Indian philosophers say there is suffering, but we can also show you how to end it. What is the means? In a simple way, Tulsidas, the great saint of India, I will just quote him. He has written wonderful poetry. So, he says to us that you have suffered enough. Now, अब नाथ ही अनुरागु जागु जड़ त्यागु दुरासा जीते बुझै न काम अग्नि तुलसी कहूँ विषय भोग बहु घीते. Ghee, if you pour it into fire, in the fire of desire, the fire will burn brighter. So, like ghee is to fire, satisfaction of desire, sensual desire, is to the fire of our desire. So, like when you pour ghee, the fire burns brighter. The more you enjoy worldly pleasures, the desire to enjoy them also increases. So, what is the solution? Ab nath hi anurag. Nath means Swami. Swami means master. Anuragu means now you start loving your master, that is God. Jagu. Jagu means awake. How long will you sleep in this misery? Tyagu durasha jite. Durasha means asha is hope in Sanskrit and other Indian languages also. Now, when you combine du with that, it becomes durasha. Durasha means false hope. False hope of getting permanent happiness, unmixed happiness in this world. Tyagu, give that up. In 2 lines, he has beautifully said, give this false hope, it will never be satisfied. And then put your mind to something which is permanent and which will give you permanent satisfaction. That is your own nature, your higher self, which we call God. So, Indian philosophy does not believe in dreaming golden dreams which have no foundation in truth. Like if we believe there is a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, we will go on running throughout our lives. But we won't find that pot of gold because there is no such thing. For children it may be said, but if grown-ups also believe in something like that, what will you say? So, thinking about those things which have no basis in reality in our real world is a tremendous mistake. Misery is a part and parcel of our existence in this world, and thinking otherwise can be dangerous. So, thinking that everything will be fine in the world, all will be milk and honey, it's no good at all, it will destroy us. So on this also Swami Vivekananda explains this beautifully. I quote, the enjoyments of the senses sometimes assume another phase which is dangerous and tempting. The idea that a time will come when all the miseries of life will cease and only its joys and pleasures will remain, and this earth will become a heaven. This idea I do not believe. This earth will always remain the same. It is a most terrible thing to say, yet I do not see my way out of it. The misery in the world is like chronic rheumatism. Drive it from one part and it goes to the other. Whatever you do, it is still there. Unquote. This is what Swami Vivekananda says. Because why? We have already seen that in our classes here. We have already seen that the reason is because worldly happiness and worldly misery are the obverse and reverse of the same coin. You cannot have one without the other. This is the so-called pessimistic side, but as I have said, it also has the Indian philosophy also has a wonderfully optimistic side. In one short sentence, Raja Maharaj symbolizes this. Raja Maharaj means Swami Brahmananda. He says, performed sadhana means spiritual practices. Perform sadhana and you will realize how unnecessary man's suffering is. Carrying as he does this mine of infinite bliss within him. Within us, all of us, we carry an infinite bliss, a mine of infinite bliss which can never be exhausted. And it is here, it is not that we have to go to America, India, Canada, any place else. It is right within us. And when we get there, we will realize, when we perform spiritual practices, we will realize that our sufferings are absolutely unnecessary. We have invited them upon us. So Swami Vivekananda says regarding the same subject, so what can be more optimistic than this? I will just quote him, then we will see. He says, quote, our philosophy insists that there is a joy which is absolute, which never changes. That joy cannot be the joys and pleasures we have in this life. And yet Vedanta shows that everything that is joyful in this life is but a particle of that real joy, because that is the only joy there is. Every moment we are enjoying the absolute bliss, though covered up, misunderstood and caricatured. Wherever there is any blessing or joy, it is that absolute bliss coming out, only it has become obscured, muddled up with all sorts of extraneous conditions and misunderstood. Unquote. This is what Swamiji says. So what can be more optimistic? The mine of infinite bliss is within us. Actually, we are experiencing that whenever we are experiencing any joy. But we have become confused. That is why we are satisfied with these petty pleasures which lead to great miseries and don't go to the source. So this particular thing, this what Swamiji says has been beautifully expressed in one of Rabindranath Tagore's songs. He says that, "O God, you were the pleasure which I experienced in my childhood while I was playing in a childhood place. But that very small pleasure made me forget you. And I spent my life in vain. I will just sing it. I don't remember what comes. While singing, it will come. It is a beautiful song. তুমি মোর আনন্দ হয়েছিলে আমার খেলায়, তুমি মোর আনন্দ হয়েছিলে আমার খেলায়, আনন্দে তাই ভুলেছিলেম, আনন্দে তাই ভুলেছিলেম, কেটেছে দিন হেলায়। গোপন রহি গভীর প্রাণে আমার দুঃখ সুখের গানে, গোপন রহি গভীর প্রাণে আমার দুঃখ সুখের গানে, সুর দিয়েছ তুমি, আমি তোমার গান তো গাইনি, আমার হিয়ার মাঝে লুকিয়েছিলে, দেখতে আমি পাইনি তোমায়, দেখতে আমি পাইনি। So you are in my heart all the time, but I could not see you. And what is the reason? He says, বাহির পানে চোখ মেলেছি, বাহির পানে আমার হৃদয় পানে চাইনি, আমার হিয়ার মাঝে লুকিয়েছিলে। বাহির পানে চোখ মেলেছি, চোখ means eyes. My eyes were always turned outside. I did not see what is in my own heart. You are always there. You cannot leave me. So how beautifully it has been expressed. How can one call this pessimistic? Tulsidas says, आनंद सिंधु मध्य तव बासा, बिनु जाने कसी मरसी पियासा. Anand Sindhu, in the ocean of bliss. Tava Basa means your home. Your home is the ocean of bliss. Binu Jane Kasi Marasi Piyasa. You don't know this. And you are dying of thirst. You are dying of thirst. While the ocean of bliss, you are in that bliss. You are immersed in that bliss always. So, but why we can't get it? Because to understand that, to get that bliss, we have to go through the process of negation first. Then the positive side will begin. We have to give up ignorance and all that is false, and then only the truth will begin to reveal itself to us. This is the thing. We have to give up all these petty joys and miseries of the world. Then only can we reach that ocean of bliss. So, this is the answer to sometimes what objection is raised against Indian philosophy. They say that we are pessimistic. We say that no, we are bold enough to present the truth before all mankind, so that they will not be diverted from the real goal and their efforts will not be futile. So this is the first principle, first common factor in all the Indian philosophies, which is that liberation or complete cessation of our sufferings is our goal. This is the goal of each and every philosophical system. So, I think so many things have been said today, very important things. I think we should end the discussion on philosophy here. The remaining time we can continue with our study of the very interesting study of the Mahabharata. So in the beginning, I will just quote Sister Nivedita. You must be knowing that Sister Nivedita has, there's a book published by Advaita Ashrama, written by Nivedita, The Cradle Tales of Hinduism. So, in the dedication to the book, Nivedita says, beautifully she says, dedicated to all those souls who have grown to greatness by their childhood's love of the Mahabharata. Dedicated to all those who have grown to greatness by their childhood's love of the Mahabharata. So, love of the Mahabharata will lead to greatness. And I will also quote another person about what he says about the Mahabharata. The Mahabharata has molded the character and civilization of one of the most numerous of the world's people. How did it fulfill, how is it still continuing to fulfill this function? By its gospel of dharma, which is like a golden thread that runs through all the complex movements in this epic. So by this golden thread of dharma, it will fulfill this function, and by its lesson that hatred breeds hatred, that covetousness and violence lead inevitably to ruin, and that the only real conquest is in the battle against one's own lower self. See how beautifully it has been put. So, as we know that Mahabharata is an allegory, so in the Mahabharata itself, how this allegory is described, I will start with that. It says, Duryodhano Manyumayo Mahadruma. Druma is a vriksha, a tree. Manyumayo means made of anger. So Duryodhana is a tree of anger, and Skandha Karna. Karna is this main body of the tree, Skandha. And Shakuni, the evil Shakuni tasya shakha. Shakha is branches. So here by anger, it denotes all the evil qualities. So Duryodhana is the personification of these qualities. The main body of that tree, which is Duryodhana, is Karna, who supports him in every way, and the branches are Shakuni, and Dushasana Pushpa Phale Samriddhe. Pushpa and Phala, the flowers and the fruits, is Dushasana. In this way it has been described. This tree of anger is Duryodhana. The main trunk is Karna. The branches are the evil Shakuni. And the fruits are Dushasana. And what is the root of this tree? Moolam Raja Dhritarashtra Amanishi. Manishi means intelligent, wisdom. Amanishi means ignorant. So the root of this tree, which is Duryodhana, all the evils, is Dhritarashtra. Why? Because Dhritarashtra has no discrimination. He symbolizes ignorance. He has no control over his mind, over his attachments. If he had only controlled Duryodhana at the very beginning, so much violence would never have taken place. So this Dhritarashtra is the root. On the other side, on the side of the Pandavas, it is said, Yudhishthiro Dharmamayo Mahadruma. Druma, tree. Dharmamayo. Yudhishthir is the tree of Dharma. Skanda Arjuna Bhimaseno Asya Shakha. The main trunk is Arjuna, and the branches of which are Bhima. Bhima is brother. Then Pushpa and Phala, what are these? Madri Sutau Pushpa Phale Samriddhe. Madri, another wife of Pandu. Sutau means sons. So Madri, as from the chart you can see, she had two sons, Nakula and Sahadeva. They are the fruits and flowers. So Yudhishthira is the tree of Dharma, Arjuna is the main trunk, and of which Bhimsena is the branches, and the sons of Madri are the fruits and flowers. And what is the mula of this tree? Root of this tree? Moolam Krishno Brahmacha Brahmanascha. The root of this tree of Dharma is none other than Krishna, God Himself. Brahmacha, cha in Sanskrit means and. So Brahmacha means and Brahma. Brahma here means Veda. So the root is God, the Vedas, and Brahmanascha. Brahmana means all the saints and sages. This is the root of that tree, of the tree of Dharma, which is Yudhishthira. So in a beautiful way it has been said that Duryodhana is anger and Karna, Shakuni, Dushasana all were with him, means they are all his different forms, branches like greed, deceit, violence, etc. And the root is ignorance, which is Dhritarashtra. And Yudhishthira is the tree. Pandavas, they denote all the noble qualities that spring from this tree of Dharma, like truth, non-violence, charity, service. And God Himself, because He is of the nature of knowledge, He is the root. And He is not different from the Vedas and the saints. So this is what is said. So, as we have seen last time, before we go into the actual story, we have to, one of the most important characters, Bhishma Pitamaha, the grandsire of the Kauravas and Pandavas, a very, very great personality, a great devotee, a great jnani. We have to know his story first. So we will just start it today. It will not be able to end, it will not be possible to end it, but we will start it. So, Bhishma was the son of Shantanu. Shantanu was a great king. About his greatness, Mahabharata says, Sa Devaraja Sadrisho Dharmagya. Dharmagya means well versed in Dharma. And Devaraja Sadrisho. Sadrisho means equal to Devaraja. Deva is God, Raja is king. So the king of the gods, Indra. So he was a knower of Dharma, and like Indra himself, Satyavak Riju. He was very, very truthful and Riju. Riju means he was straightforward. He had no deceit. Then Dana Dharma Tapo Yogat Shriya Parama Yuta. Yuta means he was endowed with. He was endowed with what? Dana, charity. Dharma, dharma we all know. Tapa, tapa is tapasya, austerities. Yoga. So yoga means all these were joined with him. All being joined with all these noble qualities, he was shining, as it were. He was such a great person, Shantanu. So this King Shantanu, he was once wandering on the banks of the Ganga. There he saw a very, very beautiful lady. So Shantanu was completely enamored of her beauty, and he approached her saying that uh, I want to make you my wife. You must certainly become my wife, whoever you may be. So he pleaded with her. In Sanskrit he said, Yache tvam bharya me bhava shobhane. Shobhane means, oh beautiful one. Yache tvam, I beg of you, me bharya bhava, be my wife. Yache tvam bharya me bhava shobhane. Please become my wife. In this way he pleaded with her. Thus pleaded the great King Shantanu to that lady. That lady was none other than goddess Ganga. River Ganga we all know. So that lady was none other than the goddess Ganga, and Shantanu requested her, being completely intoxicated with her great loveliness and beauty. He asked her to be his wife. He offered her all that he had, and Ganga agreed. Ganga agreed to become his wife, but she put two very strange conditions. He said yes. She said yes, I will become your wife, but on certain conditions. What were those conditions? His first condition is Tattu kuryam aham rajan shubham va yadi va ashubham. Aham tattu kuryam aham, whatever I may do, shubham, good, or ashubham, or it is not good in your eyes, na tad varayitavyasmi, you will not tell me not to do those things. Whatever I do, you have to give me full freedom. Even if you think that what I am doing is not proper, you cannot make me desist from that. And na vaktavya tatha apriyam. And because of that, you will not say anything harsh to me. So two conditions. First of all, whatever I may do, even if it doesn't if it doesn't look good to you, you cannot make me desist. Secondly, na vaktavya apriyam, you cannot say anything harsh which will hurt me, to me. So if you can behave in this way, evam hi vartamane ham Tvai vatsyami parthiva. If you behave in this way, I will be your wife. But varita vipriyam cha ukta tyajeyam tvam asanshayam. Asanshayam, without any doubt. If you try to stop me or say anything harsh, tyajeyam, I will leave you. I will leave you then and there if you try to stop me from anything I do or tell me anything harsh. If you agree to this, I will become your wife. So the Shantanu was so infatuated, he vowed his assent, and Ganga became his wife and lived with him. The heart of the king was captivated by Ganga's modesty and grace and the love she bore him. So they lived a life of seemingly perfect happiness, oblivious of the passage of time. But this was soon to change when Ganga did something most horrible which the king could not imagine in his wildest dreams, and he had to stop her. He had to ask her what and why she was doing. So what she did, we can See the next time. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Shri Ram Krishna Arpanamastu. So, like every time, I will just unmute you one by one so that if you have any questions, you can ask. Yogi ji.
No, Maharaj. Maharaj, very good.
Thank
As
you.
usual. Very good.
Just like the food you are giving. Thank you. Uttam Saha, any question, please?
No, thank you, Maharaj. Namaskar.
Okay. Okay. Then Umadi.
No, Maharaj, thank you. Nothing to ask.
Okay. Mr. Talukdar. Talukdar, any question?
No, Maharaj.
No question?
No questions, but I enjoyed the singing.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Supriya ji, any question?
Yes, what was the sloka you said about Ananda Sindhu Tava?
Anand Sindhu Madhya Tava Basa.
Ananda Sindhu Madhya Tava Vasa.
Yeah.
And
Kasi
then the what?
jane tu marasi piyasa. Without knowing that you are dying of thirst.
Okay. And I have one more question.
Yeah.
When we are talking, probably you are going to discuss it later, but when you say good, bad, how we have to live a thoughtful life of thoughtfulness,
Yeah.
this is very subjective and very broad.
No, one principle there is no subjectiveness. Whatever leads to misery is bad. Whatever leads us away from God leads to misery today or tomorrow is bad. This rule can never change.
Okay, so misery is, the definition is whatever leads us to away from God.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, and one more thing, you have the suffering, the 4 stage of suffering, you said, suffering, cause of suffering, cessation of suffering, and what was the last point?
The way of cessation. How to get rid of suffering.
Okay, thank you very much, Maharaj, and the
Okay.
song was beautiful.
Thank you.